Podolsk, Russia, right on the outskirts of the capital. Moscow. This is not a front line, but the heart of the homeland, declared a safe zone by the Kremlin. However, the final evidence leaked from Russian telegram channels and spread across social media is indistinguishable from that of a war zone. Messages typed with trembling, frozen fingers document an internal collapse. No water, no electricity, no heating. This is not speculation, but a painful reality experienced by millions of Muscovites. The Kremlin's special military operation propaganda froze to death that night in the icy pipes of Podolsk's apartment buildings. The war has truly come home to Russia. So, how did this ultimate chaos begin? On the night of October 21, 2025, the Russian Federation experienced one of the most coordinated and deepest waves of attacks since the start of the war. But this time, the targets were not just ammunition depots or military bases. Ukraine's intelligence target list was designed to directly pierce Moscow's energy shield. This was an operation topple the plug on the capital's life support system. Initial data revealed 2 critical strikes confirmed by military bloggers' sources. The first occurred in the Smolensk Oblast. The main power plant, the heart of regional power generation, was hit by multiple long-range kamikaze drones. NASA firm satellite data confirmed a massive fire in the main block of the facility, which burned out of control throughout the night and was visible from miles away. This plant was a key part of the main grid supplying not only the city of Smolensk, but also the Moscow metropolitan area from the west. Its destruction meant the immediate loss of hundreds of megawatts of power from the grid. The second strike occurred in Bryansk Oblast. The critical transformer station in the Truevka area in particular was destroyed with surgical precision. This was no ordinary transformer. This facility functioned as a distribution node. In other words, it was a key that received high-voltage electricity and distributed it to smaller settlements, military facilities, and civilian infrastructure around Moscow. The loss of Truevka meant that even if electricity was generated, it could not reach the outer ring of the capital. These targets were never random. This was the final stage of Ukraine's Strangle Moscow strategy. To understand this strategy, one must grasp the dual-layer strangulation strategy. The first layer, the strategic phase, had been struck just days earlier on October 18th. That day, Ukrainian drones flew more than 900 kilometers deep, reducing the Veshkaima 500 kV main transformer station on the Volga River to ashes. This meant cutting off the main HS line, the main artery feeding Moscow. This was hitting the system's main generator. However, this attack triggered the second layer. Another attack on October 21st triggered the tactical phase. Ukraine was no longer just targeting the main source, Veshka, 900 kilometers away. It was systematically destroying Smolensk and Bryansk, the capital's circuit breakers. In the first phase, they blew up the main water pipes of buildings. In the second phase, they broke the valves leading to each apartment. The attacks in Smolensk and Bryansk were exactly that. They were critical nodes in the internal distribution network surrounding Moscow and providing it with its last lifeline. As Russian grid operators desperately tried to redirect electricity to Western lines to compensate for the strategic loss at Veshkaima, Ukraine cut off these backup routes as well. This was military genius. It turned the greatest weakness of Russia's energy grid, its centralized and fragile structure, into a weapon. The grid now had no flexibility, no spare capacity left. On the night of October 21st, fires in Smolensk and Bryansk burned not only transformers, but also Moscow's last line of defense. The capital was choked off simultaneously from both its main arteries and its capillaries. The siege was complete. This final blow on October 21st was not planned overnight. It was the culmination of a systematic campaign of destruction that Ukraine had been meticulously working on for months, testing the Russian energy grid and internal resistance. Moscow's energy shield had been dismantled piece by piece since the end of September. These images are not from the Eastern Front in Ukraine. From Kharkiv, the ice sculpture you see on the screen is the exterior of what was once a warm apartment building. This is Podolsk, just a few kilometers from Moscow. And this winter, the war came to Russia's doorstep like this. While the Kremlin used energy as a weapon to bring Ukraine to its knees, the eyes of the world were on the missiles and tanks. But the real battle was being fought silently and deeply within Russia's own lifelines. Now, in the fourth and most brutal winter of the war, Putin's strategy has backfired with one of history's greatest ironies. The weapon designed to freeze Ukraine has turned its barrel around and is now shooting its owner. This is no accidental malfunction. It is the inevitable result of decades of decaying infrastructure being sacrificed to feed the war machine. For millions of Russian citizens, the war is no longer a propaganda show watched on television. It is a bone-chilling cold felt inside their homes. To understand the origins of this total collapse, we must look beyond a burst pipe or a burning transformer and examine the first domino that started the chain reaction. The Kremlin's deliberate choices. This catastrophe is not an accident, but the physical manifestation of a series of decisions signed on paper with priorities clearly defined. Vladimir Putin announced that he was raising defense spending to a record level unseen since the Cold War, exceeding 7% of gross domestic product. However, what would pay this price was quietly hidden in the footnotes of the budget. In this vast country, spread across 11 time zones, millions of people are now victims not only of war, but also of neglect and destruction. Last winter, hundreds of thousands of people in 43 different regions were forced to live for days without heat, water, or electricity due to burst pipes and collapsed heating systems in temperatures reaching -30°. Now, the same crisis is looming. Again, this time, the situation is even more dire because Putin's Russia is preparing to freeze not only at the front, but also in its cities. The energy infrastructure has collapsed, municipalities have gone bankrupt, and local governments are powerless. The timeline of the collapse proves how the Kremlin ignored the impending disaster. The first step of the operation took place in Belgorod between September 28th and October 6th, 2025. Belgorod had been Russia's main logistics hub since the start of the war, and the Kremlin considered it expendable. On September 28th, the Luch power plant washed it multiple times. Local telegram channels confirmed water and power outages across large parts of the city. When Russian repair crews partially restored the facility, Ukraine struck again on October 6th. This second strike was a military message. You won't be able to repair it. As a result, more than 40,000 civilians were left without electricity and water for days. This was not just a strike on a military target. It was a laboratory test of the collapse of the home front. Ukraine was gauging the panic effect striking civilian infrastructure would have on the Russian people. The results exceeded even their expectations. The chaos in Belgorod was a harbinger of things to come. Just days after the test phase succeeded on October 1st, the drone attacks shifted south to the Rostov Oblast. The Verkhnedonsky and Sholokovsky districts were completely blacked out by midnight attacks. Rostov was not a civilian testing ground like Belgorod. It is the main command and supply center of Russia's southern military district. The disruptions here hit railway control centers, military command shelters, and communication relays more than civilian homes. Ukraine proved that it could target not only civilian morale, but also the nervous system of the Russian war machine. In mid-October, the nature of the operation changed. The target was no longer the border regions, but Russia's strategic depth. On October 16th, the media ran headlines such as "Lights Out in 3 regions." The focus of the operation was the Balashevskaya transformer station in the Volgograd Oblast. This strike was different from the previous pinprick attacks. It signaled the beginning of a strategic stranglehold targeting key resources. This strike was the first blow to the backbone of the Russian energy grid. And just 48 hours after the preparatory strike on October 16th, on October 18th, the strategic checkmate move came. This was the keystone of the entire operation. Ukrainian drones destroyed the Veshka 500 kV main substation located approximately 500 km from Kiev and more than 900 km deep inside Russia. The importance of this target cannot be overstated. A 500 kV substation is the toll booth of the national grid. It was the main hub where tens of thousands of megawatts of power from the Jigalvskaya HPPP, one of Russia's largest hydroelectric power plants, were distributed to all of central Russia, including Moscow. The strike on Veshkaima meant cutting off Moscow's main HP line. This was the evaporation of the capital's main power source. Russian engineers were in shock. The grid instantly destabilized. The only remaining option to keep Moscow running was to draw power from weaker secondary lines in the west and south. And Ukraine knew that this is exactly what the Russians would do. The moment Russian engineers shifted power westward to compensate for the disaster at Veshka, Phase 2 began on October 21st. Smolensk and Bryansk, Terchevware hit. The trap was closed. Ukraine had, in effect, forced Russia out of its home and locked the emergency exit doors it was trying to flee through. Moscow's energy siege was complete with this ingenious five-step strategy. The ripple effect of this chain of attacks runs much deeper than the cut electricity. They lost both the power plants and the military facilities.